Okay, we know Madon Eloheinu Aleinu Maaseh Adenu Koninah Onel with the head. Hargashot ve'adibur belev ruach. Right. You have the Maaseh is the nefesh is the goof. Yes, we good with that action.
Say it again. I want to make
Of the neshama specifically is in the thought. Yes. Okay. Hargashot says the person, right? It's the nefesh is cut off from the above. Okay.
Nefesh is in the blood, right?
Nefesh Adam ba'adam hu.
In the blood, and there's like a message sent to the body.
Force. One could say it's the oxygen and glucose. Okay, then they have I'm not sure they have nefesh. So anyway, so we got that. Okay, the seder hapeulot shekodem b'machshavto. So what happens is, how does a person act? The first beginning of the action is in the machshava, yeah, thought. That's where. Why do you have action? Because you have thought, right, and then you have action. Thought, source of action. We good? Yeah. Okay. Et ha-chokhmah, which means that's from the chokhmah, right? Ve'achar kach habina mitzayeret umivina ech la'asot, right? So a thought has a thought about something to do. The bina then directs that thought into focusing on an action, and then the action happens based on the body. Okay. Ve'adat hu shlemut hachibur ben chokhmato lebinato, and the dat he's saying is the connection between the Chokhmah and the Binah, the shlemut of them together, operating together, that's the Da'at. Okay? What's he leaving out? Because he's talking about Da'at, he's leaving out the Keter. What is the Keter? So what is the Keter? What's the difference? What's the Keter? So we say you have the Chokhmah, which is the wisdom. You have the Binah, which is the focus of the wisdom, right? Into... Right? And what is this? So what's the keter? They're not the source of keter. What's the keter? That represents what? So machshava is represented by the chokhmah. Bina, lahavin, is the discernment, understanding is represented by the bina. Da'at is knowledge. When the da'at is not looked at and you have the keter, what's the keter? Ratzon, will. Okay? Ratzon. Umasbia lechol chai.
Where they say everything starts with
Ratzon.
Ratzon.
What is Ratzon? Yes. And that's why it's not understandable by human beings. Because we can't understand the Ratzon of Hashem. It's not something that is within human comprehension. We don't know that. Okay? We can chokhmah, we can figure out why we have mitzvot, why that's there from a wisdom point of view, but ratzon we can't. All we can say is this is what Hashem wanted. Okay? Allah b'machshavto, it says, it rose up in his thought, which means he had a ratzon to create a world. That we know. How do we know that God had a ratzon to create a world? Because it's a world. Right? So anything Hashem has a ratzon for can happens. Yes? If he does.
You had a desire
Same idea. And if you think about it, our desires also are not easily understandable. For instance, what's your favorite fruit, Steve?
Chinese.
What?
Chinese.
No, not fruit. 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 Today. You're agnostic?
Yeah. It's not agnostic, but I like a lot of fruit.
All right. What's your favorite fruit?
I like figs.
Figs.
I love figs.
Yeah.
Okay. Charlie, what's your favorite fruit? Fruit.
My favorite
fruit. Just pick one. Pomegranates. Now I'm going to ask you, why?
Because it's got a lot of nutritional things.
It's the only fruit that has nutritional things?
The ones I like.
Why do you
It's one of the only fruit.
Why do you like
edible.
figs?
You can just pick it and eat it. There's really everything is edible.
Okay, apples are completely edible.
No, the seeds have cyanide.
Okay.
Everything is edible in the fig. It's one of the only ones.
Really? No other fruit that like that? Let's think about that.
There's
no other fruits like that? No, the fruit's completely edible?
There is
Like grapes, cherries.
Grapes are completely edible.
Peaches.
Kiwi. You can eat the kiwi.
Okay, grapes are edible completely.
No, but you have
not everyone eats that skin.
And
so what am I getting at? You have an idea. You have an idea of why you have a will for that, but you don't really know. because many fruits are sweet. So if you say you like watermelon, okay, watermelon's sweet, right? Well, so is mango. Why'd you say mango? Why'd you say watermelon, not mango? So really, we don't have a good understanding of our own ratzon. Okay. Nevertheless, how could you have an understanding of the ratzon of Hashem? There's no way. Okay. Continuing on. ואחר כך צריך לעשות למעשה בפועל מה שחשב בדעתו. And what happens then? The person then does the action based on the machshava and the binah, right? That's how we work. We have a thought to do something. We have the binah. The dot connects the two of them, and then there's action. If you want to understand that from a biological point of view, you have the brain, right brain, left brain, chokhmah, binah, okay? Then you have the dot represented by the spinal cord, medulla and spinal cord, right? So the signal comes from the brain, goes through the spinal cord, and goes out to the body. So we see there's a correspondence between what we understand about how brain transmits signals, yes, for the most part, which is connected to what we're talking about here, okay? And if a person does action based on his sechel, based on his mind, the proper thing, then he's called a maskil, meaning what? Intelligent. What's the opposite of a maskil? A shota. What's a shota? Does things that are stupid.
Is that like ignoramus?
You know, a shota is a fool.
Fool.
I thought it was like someone with cerebral palsy.
No. So again, they're not. I'm talking about someone who's
From the Gemara.
They're a shota from a halachic point of view. Yes, okay. A shota is someone who's a fool, like a ksil. How about that? That's a better term. Ksil is a fool. Leitzan is a clown. Okay, they act in ways that are foolish and clowny and not a word. Foolish and stupid. Why? Because they're not connecting to their proper part of they're not using their brain properly. Okay. From his knowledge, he knows that when he teaches, he's supposed to educate with pleasantness, right? Divrei chachamim benahat nishmaim, right? Things of sages are heard based on nice. You don't have to be nasty to people to teach them, right? You know, there's old saying: you can tell someone to go to hell, they look forward to the trip. You know, sometimes it's enough just to hint to something, and that's enough information that people die. You give a hint, and they get the message. Okay. But when he's giving it over to his students, now sometimes when the students are not behaving properly, what does he have to do? The teacher has to behave with anger, behave with emotion. Yes. Why? Again, inside, he's not supposed to be angry. If he is, then he shouldn't be teaching, right? Okay. He's supposed to be faking it on the outside. This, of course, talking about cheating children, right? Children, you know, they do things that are foolish because they're children. Yes. So when they're misbehaving, there's an anger one has to display. Okay, but that should not be anger on the inside. Because what happens when a person gets angry? What happened to Moshe Rabbeinu when he got angry?
Amen. Twice, he hit twice the rock.
What happened when he got angry? When he gets angry 3 times in the Torah, what happens?
Hashem leaves him.
He forgets the halacha.
Yeah.
It's huge. Here's a guy who basically, hold on a second, let me talk to God and get the answer, right? And when he gets angry, what happens? He forgets the halacha. So if Moshe Rabbeinu, the wisest, most incredible rabbi we've ever had, every time he got angry, forgot the halacha, then a teacher who's getting angry, what's happening? If angry on the inside, forgetting the halacha. Can't teach. How can you teach if you forget the halacha? What's that?
You get blank when you get angry.
Correct. Exactly. Okay.
Same effect, I think, when a person is depressed and sad. Look at Yaakov. Yaakov, he lost his connection with the Shekinah.
So let's think about what's the practical aspect of it. When a person gets angry, not angry on the outside only, but inside and outside. Okay? What does the Talmud say? Ilu oved avodah zara. It's as if he's worshiping avodah zara. How do we understand that from the Sod? When a person gets angry, They're not getting the shefa from above.
They cut themselves off.
It gets cut off.
You get from the side.
When there's no shefa from
Self-induced
above.
karat.
So that's why ki'ilu obed avodah zarah, right? He gets connected to the chas v'shalom the sitra achra, right? Which is NG complete. We don't want that. Okay. Shelo al pi sichlo ela al pi midotav. So what happens? He's behaving based on his midot. Hopefully it's not midot because his midot that's bad midot. The rak adam sheoseh mehaberet machshavto lemaasav. Only when there's a connection between the machshava and the maaseh, which means there always has to be that positive connection. So even if the teacher is getting angry, the anger is coming from his machshava, right? Which means I'm going to show the students now I'm angry, even though on the inside he's not angry. Yes?
Teach a lesson.
When he allows his emotions to get the best of him, right? Then what happens? It's not the machshava anymore. That's already potentially defective. Okay? Continuing. And what does this? The yisod shemechaber hadat leolam hamaaseh nikra maskil. So the yisod is what connects the shefa from above to the world of action. You get just spoon over there, right? It connects to the world of action because malchut is distributing it to the lower worlds. Ultimately, there's the world of asiyah, right? But it's the yisod. If you think about the yisod in the world of the yetzirah, right? Not the Yetzirah, the world of, the world of the Yetzirah. That Yesod, what is it doing? It's connecting to the world of Malchut, which is the Keter of the world of the Asiyah. Okay? Sof Sefer Mishlei, like the Gaon Mivilna explained in Sefer Mishlei. Chochma hu haskalat hamuskal bichlalut. Chochma is the intelligence of the intelligent person in a general way. In a general way. I'll explain what I mean with this in a second. The hotzat hasechel min hakoach, and the bringing out that intelligence from potential el hapoel to action, hu hayesod. That's the yesod. So the yesod is responsible for transforming the potential into action. Okay. V'nikra adam chacham sheyesh lo sechel laskil, and a person is chacham. When is a person called a chacham? That he has sechel laskil, that he's intelligent and he shows that intelligence. Aval adayin general topic, a general heading. Ubina, what does the bina do? Letzayer hadavar, to draw it, to limit it, because general, it's a specific action. We have to bring it from a generalized action to a specific action. And that's the bina that focuses the chokhmah to do that action. Letzayer hadavar leavdil davar mi davar v'chol davar bepratut. And it gives the pratim, the details, okay? The da'at hu hamuskal shiyada et hadavar lecha shechacham. And the da'at is the person who's already intelligent that knows the item after the chacham shechacham ve'evin, when he had the wisdom and he had the understanding. That goes to the da'at. And from the da'at he goes to the tiferet and then goes to the yisod. Yes. Beledet adam. It's like when the birth of a person in a childbirth. She'ikar ba mitipat ha'av sheyeh chochmah. That the ikar comes from the tipa, the seed of the father. The em mitzayeret hayeled. But what does the em do? The em gives him a tziyur, gives him a form, right? Think about it, the mother. How do we understand this biologically? Even though from a DNA point of view, it's half and half, let's forget about DNA for 1 second, okay? From a size point of view, what's bigger, the sperm or the egg?
The egg is much bigger.
The egg is bigger, right?
Absorbs the sperm.
The sperm goes into the egg, and then for
two
2 weeks,
Yep.
okay, the sperm until there's implantation. Yes, how does the sperm live? It has to have energy, it has to eat, has to have. How does it survive? No, you're thinking about my genetics. I'm talking about how does the sperm survive? Sperm survives because the egg itself has nutrition, right? So the sperm goes in until there's implantation when it can connect to the mother source, right? About 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, yeah, or maybe whatever, a couple days. But in the meantime, until there's a complete connection and the egg burrs itself into the endometrial lining and can get nourishment from the uterus directly. Okay, and then of course the placenta forms, right? But at the end of the day, until there's actually receiving nourishment from the uterus, the sperm is getting nourishment from the egg. And then, of course, the egg is bigger. So we see the sperm goes into the egg, but the egg gives it siur, gives it a drawing, right? Anyway, DNA is more complicated because that's the same for both. They're half and half, 23 and 23. Okay.
By the way, just so you know, I looked it up in terms of the sex of the child. They're saying in AI that it happens almost instantaneously.
The what?
The sex of the child. I looked it up in AI, and scientists say that it's done almost instantaneously. That it takes place.
Okay. So of course, it's instantaneously. Where if it's an X or a Y chromosome
Yeah.
that attaches, it's the ultimate sex of it is determined.
Oh, I
Okay.
didn't realize.
But at what point does the Y chromosome act? Remember, it starts off XX or XY. So now it's the egg, okay, with a sperm inside. It's a Y sperm goes into an X egg. Okay, that's going to be a boy, right? At what point does the Y chromosome start to manifest itself and cause the change? Because it's X, the
Saying
egg
that
is
could be-
X.
That could be 40
That's
days.
40 days.
Now, is it possible that Y could become an X and therefore it's a girl? I mean,
Not without miraculous intervention.
okay.
Okay, that's Yosef and Leah.
Got it?
Yosef and
Dina.
Dinah.
Dina. They were exchanged.
And it didn't work out so well.
That's why he was so beautiful.
Think about it. What was the ramifications for Dinah? What happened?
She gets raped.
She goes out. The problem is
Yeah, she's talkative.
she
she's
goes
like-
out.
More like a guy.
Meaning that's a guy. She
Yeah.
wasn't talking to guys. She's talking to girls, right? But
Yeah,
she goes
she's
out.
Very
It says
talkative and out in the
Vatetse
marketplace.
Dinah bat Leah. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out. So Rashi says that she's the daughter of Leah. Why does it say the daughter of Leah? Because just like Leah went out to greet Yaakov, right? After she had 4 kids, and she said, "You're going to be with me tonight." That's not exactly appropriate, kind of thing. Even though she was doing L'Shem Shamayim, the Torah says "Vatetse Leah,"
You
right?
got to do the
So it
A's,
says
let's
Yatzanit
party
bat
out.
Yatzanit. That Dinah was a Yatzanit. She was one who wanted to go out, the daughter of another Yatzanit, which is Leah. Okay, so that's at the Peshat level. That's what the Torah tells us, right? But the inside, since Dinah was supposed to be a boy, it's the derech of a boy to go out and a girl not to go. Kol kvuda bat melech penima. So because Dinah was initially supposed to be a boy, was changed to be a girl, she still retained that quality of going out, which was not good for her. And look at Yosef. Yosef, what does it say? When did the wife of Potiphar finally go after Yosef? What
In the
happened?
house. He went.
What did Yosef do? No, that's already after she'd been working on him for months. What did Yosef do? There has to be an action that Yosef did that led the wife of Potiphar to.
Yeah.
So what happened? Yosef he was sold by his brothers, right? He knows his father's mourning because his father thinks he's probably dead. He saw what the brothers did with the coat. He knows what they did, right? So the father thinks he's dead, and here he's alive. So he's supposed to be thinking to himself, my God, my father, he's so upset. He thinks I'm dead, but I'm really not dead, and blah, blah, blah. When he was in the house of Potiphar, within a couple of months, what happens? He becomes the number 1 slave. Yes, he becomes the big kahuna amongst the slaves. So what does he do? Since he's starting to get a little whatever, he starts looking at the mirror and making himself handsome. Ha ha! Wife of Potiphar saw him. If he would have stayed low, not tried to make himself handsome, yes, then the wife of Potiphar wouldn't have paid attention to him.
That's not the first time that was reported of him. The same thing I read with the children of the maids. He'd fool around with the mirrors, with the hair.
Okay, but that's
a woman thing to
but
do.
that's still correct. But that was still when he was with his father.
Exactly. No,
How
all I'm
can he be?
saying
It's one
is-
thing to do it then, which is uncharacteristic of men, right?
Right.
Okay, but to do it when your father is mourning, that's what opened up Potiphar's wife to go after him. So generally, when a person is being tempted, there's something they're doing to invite it, provoking it. Okay, what did Dinah do? She went out, even though she didn't have any intention whatsoever to be with men, right? But she went out. That is not something that Jewish women, do. So since she did that, it opened the door for problems. Yosef, he made himself handsome, look good. Why? He's a slave in the house of Potiphar. There's no Jewish woman around. What's he doing? He made himself look handsome, and then he caught the attention of the wife of Potiphar.
Was this all in the same year of him being sold? Because he's
Yeah, I think within 2 years.
so then he's not mourning.
And why was the wife of Potiphar interested in attention? What was wrong?
She wasn't getting it from him.
She wasn't getting it from her husband. Why wasn't he getting it from? She was getting it from her husband. Why did he buy Yosef?
Oh, he was gay.
Uh-huh.
Where
He
was
wasn't
that
gay.
from?
He was probably a switch hitter.
Okay,
Switch it.
Okay.
Right.
So what
He was
happened?
there.
Hashem didn't want it, so he made it so that his property didn't work so well
His property didn't work so well for Eshet.
for anything. He had ED.
Nega. It was his nega. Like
ED, erectile dysfunction. So what happens? He couldn't be for his wife. His wife gets lonely. And then Yosef's making himself look handsome. Bad idea. Okay?
And she's there with her friends, and she wants to show off, like, she can get this young guy. The
Okay. Midrash says that. Okay, we see that. All right, let's continue on.
Well, the lawyer said that the victim also has responsibility on the crime.
Yeah.
No victim, no crime.
You have to be careful about that because some people are true victims as opposed to, right? But we're talking from a spiritual point of view, right? I don't want to say, God forbid, a woman who gets raped because she did something to invite that. That's not the case. That's evil man, okay?
Yeah.
But we're talking from a spiritual point of view. We're talking about people who are very high level. We're not talking about normal people, right?
Right.
High level people. So when they open themselves up to something, then it's, you follow?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, let's continue on. The sechel hu hama'aseh shena'aseh be'eskel hu hatachlit shel hachokmah. The plan, the result of the chokhmah is the ma'aseh that is with sechel. How do you tell someone is wise? Their actions are intelligent. If their actions are stupid, what does that mean? They're not wise. They're stupid.
comes from the Ratzon, but Ratzon is stupid. No stupid actions.
I didn't say it comes from the Ratzon. You're adding something. I said, how does a person tell? Okay, I said this a couple of weeks ago in my class. I think it was on Shabbat. How do you tell a Talmid? How do you tell someone who has Torah knowledge?
Their actions match their wisdom.
Their actions match their wisdom. That is correct. If they have Torah knowledge, what the true Torah knowledge doesn't stay in the brain. It's supposed to go to the heart and change the person the way they speak, change the person the way they feel, change the person the way they act. If that Torah knowledge doesn't do that, then that is not a Talmid Chacham.
But they're not. See?
They may be brilliant and be able to quote you any place in the Talmud, a daf in the, online, and have a photographic memory, but that doesn't make them wise.
So they're
A computer, Safari, Google, AI, pretty smart,
Yep.
but there's no action, right? You tell a wise person, that's why it says, greater is to serve the Chacham rather than to learn from him. Why is that? Why is it greater because what, the Torah wants servants for Chachamim? Absolutely not. Why is it greater to serve the Chacham than to learn from him?
when you serve him, you'll see what his actions.
Because when you're serving the Chacham, you see the actions, thank you, appreciation, all these things that are necessary for true wisdom to show that on the outside, right? So serving the Chacham, a person learns how to act, and that's what it's all about. Learning, you're just learning intellectual stuff. You have universities in Israel where you have professors that are experts in the Talmud. That doesn't make them good people.
And we have a history of success in this area, as in Joshua, as in Eleazar. These are people who served their masters, and they became great because of that.
Correct, because you learn from the behavior of the master. That's really the goal. Right? And that's why a person should always connect themselves to someone who's a chacham. Just because someone is intelligent, at least has wisdom, doesn't mean that wisdom is translated into action. What we're saying here is true wisdom, which is the wisdom of the Torah, changes the person. If it doesn't change the person, it means they don't have wisdom. If you go to Pirkei Avot, in the last parak of Pirkei Avot, it lists the 48 qualities that are necessary to have a kinyan of the Torah, an acquisition of the Torah. Read through them. You'll see the majority. in Pirkei Avot, in the 6th chapter, the last chapter, Pirkei Avot, the end, okay? It gives the 48 qualities necessary for what's called the kinyan. What is a kinyan? Acquisition of the Torah, okay? And if you look at those 48 qualities, the majority of them are not intellectual prowess. Majority of them are behavioral. And that's why it says a person who teaches Torah to Talmid that is not Hagun, a person who teaches Torah to a student that doesn't have proper behavior, it's Kazorek Evan Lamar Kolis. It's like a person is participating in Avodah Zarah because it's going to be Chilul Hashem, because that person is going to learn, get knowledgeable, and since his actions are terrible, what's going to happen? He's going to make a Chilul Hashem. So if you have a student that is not Hagun, a student that is not behaving properly, what do you teach them? Pirkei Avot. You start with Musar. You start with behavior. You teach behavior. Mesilat Yesharim. That's what you start with. Okay. Once their behavior is proper, then you can bring it to other items.
And all these 48 qualities are at the end of the Kitab.
Kitavo, no, 6th chapter of Pirkei Avot.
Chapter 6, Pirkei Avot.
Okay. Let's continue on. The Kavanato Kmoshe Yesod Moridet Tipa Mina Moach El Gufo, just like the Yesod brings the sperm, the tipa, from the moach el gufo. Now, we talked about this. What does it mean? That's where the Muslims made the mistake. They think that sperm starts from between the shoulder blades. What did we say? En kishui ela ledat, which means in order for the member downstairs to be erect, so there can be a seminal emission, there has to be dot. It has to be connected to the dot. It has to be desired. The person has to want that, right? That's why we said a couple of weeks ago that a man cannot claim he was raped by a woman. Can't claim it. Let's say she's a weightlifter and he's a little guy, okay? He cannot claim, even if she overpowers him, that he was raped. Why? Because if his member is not hard, she can't rape him. And why is his member hard? Because he's interested. That's the participation, right? Unlike
There's no rape.
There is rape from a man to a man. A man can be raped by a man, but a man cannot be raped by a woman.
Were you implying, I think it was last week, you're talking about Mordecai and this business where Haman wants everyone to bend down, that actually they were looking to have sexual relations?
I didn't say that.
You didn't?
No, wasn't
Maybe I thought it was implied. Okay.
No. No, he wanted Avodah Zarah. He wanted them to bow down. The Midrash says he had a Avodah Zarah type of amulet on his chest.
Don't feel it.
Okay. All right. Anyway, let's continue on. Okay. Moach el gufo livnot havalad, to build the valad, to construct the embryo, the baby. Kachu moridet kol yediotav el rucho kli hamaseh. Similarly, the person, what he does is through his chokhmah and the binah, through the dot, brings it to the body to act. The same process, yes? Leotzi haskalato min hakoach al hapoel lebchinat hamaseh, to bring his wisdom or his haskalah, his intelligence, from potential into action for the purposes of action. Ubazehu nikra maskil. That's why it says gadol talmud hamevi lema'aseh. Great is Torah learning that brings a person to action. This is the world of action. Over here in this world, your potential doesn't mean anything. Yes, you get a job, right? You're getting paid X amount of dollars because your resume said you do all these wonderful things. You're being hired, right? They hire you because of your potential. How quickly does it take for a person to get fired if they're not living up to their potential? 30 days, 60 days, doesn't take that long, right? So if your action doesn't match your potential, the person gets canned. This is not a world where we work with potential. That's why Elon Musk is getting rid of all these federal workers. A lot of potential, but no action. I don't care if you got a PhD from MIT. What did you do the past week? Well, give me 5 things you did last week. You didn't do anything. That's great. You have great potential. You're out of here. We're not paying your bills. That's because it's a world of action. This is not a world of potential. Okay? And that's why, once again, the purpose of learning the Torah is to bring a person to action. Action can be teaching, that's action, sharing Torah knowledge, changing oneself, both, okay? That's what, that's really the goal. The goal of learning is to change behavior and influencing other people to change behavior. Yes? That's Baruch Hashem. And you see, it's like wild when you see that Torah is being taught properly and people are interested in learning, their behavior gets better. It just naturally happens because you're bringing in the wisdom of God into a person's being. Now, if the person works against that, says, I'm not going to change my behavior, then it doesn't necessarily work. Okay? But if a person learns Torah and allows it to go inside over the course of time, like Rabbi Akiva, what does Rabbi Akiva represent? That stone where the water was dripping and dripping and dripping, right? Dripping for a million years. Eventually, it makes a dent in the stone. Okay? The stone represents the lev, the heart of Even, right? When a person is learning and learning and learning, sooner or later, mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma, right? That learning will have an impact on his stone heart and change it into a heart of flesh, soft. Okay. Ulfisha ya David davek b'midah zot. Now David was davek b'midah zot. What is zot? There is zeh and there is zot. Zot hukata Torah. What is zot? In Parashat Acharemot, we're going to read. What does it say? 1 second. The word zot is used there too. If you give me chumash, I'll show you.
Is there, right? You're saying it there. Is that?
And what is zot? Also there. What's the difference in Hebrew? For the Hebrew speakers? Ze, zot. What's the difference? One is feminine, one is masculine. Ze is masculine, zot is feminine. Okay? So ze is Zeranpin. Ze is Kuchabrichu. What is Zot? That's the Shekhinah. That's the Malchut. That's the feminine. Zot Harukat Habayit. Not Ze Harukat Habayit, even though grammatically would be incorrect. Remember, sometimes the Torah violates grammar. It doesn't always follow the rules 100%. Sometimes we have the Torah referred to as Ze, and sometimes we have the Torah referred to as Zot. Okay? But when Zot, that's referring to the feminine. Zot Hanukkah Tabayit. Zot Hanukkah. What do it mean? What is the purpose? So a person can enter. You commemorate you do the commemoration of the Mishkan, so the people can enter. So the Shekhinah can enter and the people can enter. Right? Zot Hukata Torah. Why Zot talks about para aduma? Para is masculine or feminine? Feminine. Good. Okay. Let's see what the rabbi says. David represents Malchut. That's why he was Yefeh Enaim V'Hura Eva Shoshanim. Okay? It gives David this picture that's a little bit of a feminine type of picture, right? Yefeh Enaim, it says about David, meaning his eyes were pretty. Because David represents Malchut, which is feminine, yes? I'm not saying David was a feminine. That's not what I'm saying. But you see, there's little hints that are there in presenting him to show that the concept of Malchut is feminine. David hava midat Malchut sheha po'elet ve'oseh. It's the actual Malchut that is the one that acts. Okay? Everything else is potential. I mean, even though the Zeranpin is really the beginning of action, the action is through the Malchut. והצלחת העשייה היא שדוד במעשיו מחובר ליסוד שמושך מלמעלה את הדעת. So David operates how? Through his actions, what is he doing? He's connected to the Yesod, the Malchut, connected to the Yesod, and the Yesod draws from above the Da'at. And the Da'at is a combination of the Chokhmah and the Binah. Yes? Good, okay. The Az kol masav nasim betov, and then all of his actions are done properly with tov. Tov means what? Coming from the right place. Whether it's chesed or whether it's din. Tov can be both. Right? Tov is yesod. Very good. But when we say tov, the shefa is coming direct from above. That's tov. When shefa is coming from the side, that's called ra. Okay? V'chol zman she'asechel hu hamanhig, and every time where the sechel, the intelligence, is the manhig, is the driver, okay? V'hu machazik et kochot haguf, and the sechel holds on to the powers of the body. bimosarot, in proper borders, in proper measure. Kmo eglon hamahazik umenahelet suso, like a horse, a rider of a horse. That what is the horse? What does the jockey do? You call the jockey, right? What do they do?
The reins and control.
They pull the reins and they control the horse, right? You drive a car. You have to, the car. Well, now Tesla drives itself, but until there were self-driving automobiles, you drive the car. Kamo shekatav Rabbeinu Yonah, like Rabbeinu Yonah wrote on Mishlei, ala pasuk lakachta musar heskel. Yes? Velekichat hamusar hu kiyum hamusar. And taking the musar, which means acquiring the proper behavior, that is the musar.
Musar is behavior.
Musar is proper behavior.
Musar.
Proper behavior. Shema beni musar avicha, al titosh torat imecha. Now let's understand that. Shema beni musar avicha, al titosh torat imecha. Who's the Av and who's the M? What's that?
Av is the Zerampin.
No. Av is the Chokhmah, Abba, and the Ima is the Binah. Shema b'ni musar avicha, right? Al titosh torat imecha. Maybe that doesn't fit because Binah is the one that's supposed to be the direction. Let's see what he says a little further on. Okay? ולכן המוסר הוא קיום המוסר בפועל וישר מידותיו והנהיגם על פי המוסר עניין השכל. ההשגחה העיון בכל מעשה. What's he talking about here? Give me a second. ולקיחת המוסר הוא קיום המוסר, and when a person acquires the musar, לקחת musar heskel. That's what the book says in Mishlei. And taking the musar for oneself is the kiyum, is how a person fulfills the musar actively. Which means I say to myself, I want to behave myself, but you have to really mean it in order to make your behavior change. People know the right thing to do, like Mesilat Yesharim. What does he write in the book? Everything I'm writing here, you already know. There's no chidushim in this book. Everything I wrote in this book, everybody knows. Robert Ramchal, he wrote in the introduction to Mesilat Yesharim, there is no chidushim in this book. Everything here you already know.
What's the point of writing it?
He writes, because the things that you know the best are the things you're most likely to forget.
So it's Chazarah, really. Or
Something that is, what makes musar difficult? Question, is it easier to study a Masechet of Gemara with Rashi and Tosafot, or for a person who is arrogant to become humble? Which,
first one.
is it easier to study a Masechet of Gemara or to change the midah from being stingy to being generous? Okay, one is years of work, and then the default is always to go back to how you were, right? Which means in order to have musar, a person has to take it, has to hold on to it, and have it always. That's why Mesilat Yesharim is a book that's not meant to be read once. It's meant to be read multiple times, over and over again, like Pirkei Avot. Jewish people, we have a custom. We read Pirkei Avot from the beginning of, after Pesach all the way to Shavuot, right? We read it every single year. Why do we do that? Ashkenazim read it over the summer. Why? Because these are things that a person has to repeat. And is there anything that when a person studies Pirkei Avot that you say, oh my God, wow, I could have had a V8? No, right? It's nothing there that is incredibly shocking to us, right? It's all stuff that we sort of inherently know, but don't do.
That's right.
Right? Or the default, because the default of a human being is to behave like an animal. That's why we are technically part of the animal kingdom. What makes a human being not part of the animal kingdom? When they allow their sechel, their intelligence, to govern their behavior. What makes a Jew versus a Gentile? We have the Torah, which guides our behavior. They have their Torah. What is their Torah? What does the Talmud say about the Torah of the Goyim?
Lies,
I love this one.
lies of their father.
Torat HaGoyim Arayot.
Arayot.
Wow.
How could it be sexual?
That's what it says in the Talmud. Their entire listen. If a person doesn't have Torah, think about people, right? If there's no Torah telling you
What to do?
that shix is not healthy for you spiritually, right? Why wouldn't you? No, I got a low battery. These guys are killing me with this internet access. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna put it in a pause. 1 second.
Trying to get a
Oh, I
copy.
left my charger. Anybody else have a Wi-Fi? So you can't. Anyone else have a Wi-Fi? You Wi-Fi? On your phone.
Wi-Fi, but no,
He doesn't have an app.
here.
He doesn't have, an Apple, you have the hotspot.
Let me see if I can do it.
Let me give you my phone and you fool around with it.
No,
Have this